My parents left for their anniversary trip at 6 o'clock that evening. They weren't supposed to be back until Sunday. For a 17-year-old, a weekend alone in a large house on the edge of town feels like a luxury. It feels like freedom. By 11 o'clock, the freedom started to feel cold. Our house borders the Blackwood Nature Reserve. At night, the trees don't look like trees. They look like towering, frozen figures waiting at the edge of the lawn. I locked the front door, checked the back sliding glass door, and turned on the porch lights. I remember thinking the light didn't push the darkness back. It just gave the bugs a place to die. I was in the kitchen pouring a glass of water when the power grid failed. It wasn't a flicker. It was an instant, violent drop into absolute blackness. The refrigerator stopped humming. The digital clock on the microwave died. The only light came from the moon reflecting off the kitchen linoleum. And then, the silence arrived. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that makes your ears ring. When the power goes out in an old house, you expect to hear the wood settling. You expect the creaks. You don't expect to hear the rhythmic, wet thud of bare feet on the grass outside. I froze by the kitchen counter. The glass in my hand felt impossibly heavy. Thud. 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 The sound moved from the tree line, across the lawn, and stopped directly outside the kitchen window. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drop to the floor and crawl into the pantry. But human curiosity is a dangerous flaw. I turned my head toward the glass. The porch light was off, but the moonlight was bright enough to outline the patio. Standing there, less than 3 inches from the glass, was a shape. It was too tall. Its shoulders reached the top of the window frame. It wasn't moving. It was just pressing its face against the glass. But it didn't have a face. The skin looked smooth, like pale, wet leather stretched tightly over a skull. Where the eyes should have been, there were only deep, hollow indents. I stopped breathing. I thought if I didn't move, it wouldn't know I was inside. Then, the creature slowly raised its arm. Its fingers were long, ending in thin, jagged points. It didn't try to smash the window. It just began to tap. Very softly. Tap. 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 The sound echoed through the empty house. It wasn't trying to get in. It was testing the glass. It was checking if I was listening. I ran. I didn't care if it heard me. I scrambled up the stairs to my parents' bedroom because it has a heavy oak door with a deadbolt. My sneakers squeaked against the hardwood, and each step felt like an explosion in the quiet house. I slammed the bedroom door behind me, twisted the deadbolt, and backed away until my spine hit the mattress. Downstairs, the tapping stopped. For 2 minutes, there was nothing. No footsteps. No wind. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the thumping of my heart in my throat. I told myself it was a hallucination. I told myself the dark makes people see things. Then, from the first floor, I heard the basement door open. Creak. That door has a rusted hinge. It has a very specific, high-pitched whine that you can hear from anywhere in the house. My parents always kept it locked because the basement stairs are unstable. But I hadn't checked the basement lock. I had only checked the front and back doors. The entity didn't use the doors. It had come up from the earth. I heard it step onto the kitchen hardwood. It didn't sound like feet anymore. It sounded like heavy, damp wood dragging across the floor. Drag. Step. Drag. Step. It was moving with purpose. It wasn't exploring. It knew exactly where the stairs were. The dragging sound reached the bottom of the stairs. Step. 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 It was coming up. Each step took forever. It was mocking me. It knew I was trapped in a room with no secondary exit. The windows in my parents' room looked down onto a concrete driveway 15 feet below. Jumping meant broken legs. Staying meant I didn't know. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom door. The sliver of moonlight coming from the hallway under the door crack suddenly vanished. A massive shadow blocked it out. Whatever was standing out there was wide enough to fill the entire frame of the hallway. I pulled my knees to my chest. I closed my eyes. Then, the doorknob began to turn. Rattle. Rattle. The deadbolt held. The heavy oak wood groaned against the frame, but it didn't give way. The rattling grew faster, louder, turning into a violent shaking that made the entire wall vibrate. It was trying to rip the knob off the door. I covered my ears, weeping silently in the dark. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. A long silence followed. I opened my eyes. Through the gap at the bottom of the door, something was sliding into the room. It wasn't a foot. It was a piece of paper. The shadow moved away from the door. I heard the dragging sound descend the stairs, move through the kitchen, and fade away into the basement. I waited until the sun came up at 6 in the morning before I unlocked that door. The power was still out. The house was freezing. I picked up the paper, which had slid under the door. It was an old, yellowed page torn from a local newspaper dated August 14, 1974. The headline read, "Local family missing after basement collapse." Underneath the headline was a photograph of the family standing in front of my house. But their faces had been neatly scratched out with something sharp. When the police arrived, they searched the entire property. They found the basement door wide open. At the bottom of the stairs, the dirt floor had been dug out, revealing a deep, narrow tunnel that led directly into the woods of the Blackwood Reserve. They found no footprints inside the house. No DNA. No signs of forced entry. The police told me it was a prank by local teenagers. But they couldn't explain one thing. When they examined the bedroom door from the hallway side, there were no scratch marks on the wood. There were no fingerprints on the knob. The entity hadn't used its hands to try to open the door. It had used its teeth. The police closed the case on November 24, 1998. They called it a teenage prank. They told the public that the tunnel under my basement floor was an old bootlegger's passage from the 1920s. They lied. 2 weeks after I was discharged from the county medical center, my uncle went back to the house to pack up my belongings. The state had condemned the property, citing sudden structural instability. The concrete they used to fill the basement tunnel had cracked within 48 hours. Not from the weight of the house, but from pressure beneath the soil. While moving the heavy oak desk out of my parents' bedroom, my uncle found something stuck behind the baseboard. It was a second tape. A smaller, 8mm video cassette. It didn't belong to our family. On the plastic casing, someone had scratched a single word using a sharp tool. The word was retrieval. When we played it, we realized the events of November 11th weren't the beginning of the story. They were the conclusion. The 8mm tape contained footage recorded 24 years before I was born. It belonged to the Miller family, the people from the newspaper clipping that the entity had slid under my door. The first 10 minutes of the tape showed normal family moments. Birthdays. Summer afternoons. But as the tape progressed into August of 1974, the footage changed. The father, Arthur Miller, began filming the tree line at night. The camera movements on the tape were frantic. Paranoid. In one sequence, the camera is pointed out of the same kitchen window I looked through. The moon is exceptionally bright. The lens zooms into the dense thicket of the Blackwood Reserve. Between two massive oak trees, something is hanging upside down from a branch. It looks like a human torso, but the limbs are elongated, wrapping around the bark like vines. Arthur's hand is shaking so violently that the camera loses focus. You can hear a faint audio track on the old film. It isn't a voice. It's a rhythmic, metallic clicking sound. Like two stones being struck together underwater. The Millers didn't call the police. According to Arthur's handwritten journal found years later, the clicking sound had started coming from inside their walls 3 weeks prior. They thought it was termites. They didn't know it was an invitation. The final segment of the 1974 tape was recorded on August 14, the night the Miller family vanished. The camera was left running on a tripod in the basement. The space is completely dark, illuminated only by a single flashlight beam cutting across the dirt floor. For 6 minutes, nothing happens. The flashlight beam slowly begins to dim as the battery dies. Then, the dirt floor in the center of the frame begins to sink. It doesn't cave in violently. The soil parts smoothly, almost fluidly, like black water. From the opening, 2 long, pale arms emerge. The fingers are impossibly long, pressing into the loose dirt to pull the rest of the torso upward. It is the same entity. The wet, leather-skinned creature with no eyes. But in 1974, it was smaller. Shorter. The video shows the creature crawling toward the wooden basement stairs. It moves with a strange, sideways gait, its joints bending in directions that defy human anatomy. It stops at the bottom step. It looks directly at the camera lens. Even without eyes, you can tell it knows it is being recorded. It opens its mouth. The jaw drops down past its chest, revealing rows of thin, needle-like teeth that coat the entire interior of its throat. It doesn't scream. It emits that same underwater clicking sound. A second later, from the top of the stairs, you hear the kitchen door click open. Arthur Miller's voice calls out into the dark, "Hello? Is someone down there?" The tape cuts off there. The Millers were never seen again. But the most terrifying discovery came in 2002, when the state finally demolished the house. When the excavators tore up the concrete foundation, they found that the tunnel didn't just lead into the woods. It branched out. A subterranean network of narrow mud tunnels ran directly beneath the entire suburban neighborhood. 7 different houses on our street shared a foundation wall with those tunnels. 7 houses where families slept every night, completely unaware that less than 3 feet beneath their floorboards, something was dragging itself through the dark. In the central chamber of the tunnel network, directly beneath my old bedroom, the demolition crew found a collection of items. They found clothing from the 1970s. They found rusted car keys. And they found a neat, stacked pile of human skulls. Every single one of those skulls had been meticulously crushed from the back, with deep, jagged puncture marks marking the bone. The entity wasn't a traveler. It was a resident. And our houses were built on top of its ceiling. I live in a different state now. I live in a high-rise apartment on the 12th floor, far away from the Blackwood Reserve, far away from dirt basements and old woods. I told myself I was safe. I told myself things that live on the earth cannot climb concrete. But 3 nights ago, the power grid in my new building failed. I sat in the dark, watching the moonlight reflect off my bedroom floor. The silence came back, that heavy, suffocating silence. And then, from the hallway directly outside my apartment door, I heard it. It wasn't a footstep. It wasn't a knock. It was the rhythmic, wet thud of something heavy dragging itself across the carpet. And then, right against the brass metal of my doorknob, the soft, unmistakable sound of teeth scraping against steel. It didn't lose track. It was just waiting for me to grow up.